Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Hugh Freeze, the Auburn Tigers kicking off spring practice early last week. Want to dive into some questions and storylines that I'll be following closely as Auburn continues spring practice and these position battles continue to play out. And I look at this roster, I look at this depth chart and look at where this program is. And I think this is going to be an extremely exciting next couple of weeks. This is exactly how you want a college football roster to look like, where you have some returning guys that give you that high floor in terms of, you're going to win some football games with some of these returning starters. But all over this depth chart, you inject a ton of young talent that is going to be pushing these starters, kind of setting the scene for some really exciting position battles. And I think a really healthy spring practice for this Auburn program. And you kind of look back to where this program was 12 months ago, where Hugh Freeze gets extremely aggressive in the transfer portal. I think largely spring practice was just trying to figure out what he had on this roster. I think heading into 2024, you have a better feel of the guys. You have a better feel of what this depth chart looks like, and that's going to allow for a much more effective spring practice. Really excited to get into some of the storylines that I'm going to be following the most. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, and it truly has been a blast talking this team. We've done our position deep dives. We've covered this team in the transfer portal, and now we get a chance to see how it plays out in spring practice, a little preview to the 2024 season, a team we're going to be talking a lot about as spring practice rolls out. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Again, can't thank the Auburn fans enough for all the support you guys have shown the boys. And without further ado, let's get into this one. Now, we're going to talk about the quarterback room first, because I think that's obviously the biggest storyline as spring practice plays out. But I want to take away what in my mind was the biggest takeaway you had from the Hugh Freeze press conference. And that wasn't his conversation about the quarterback room. It was the conversation about changing this offense back to the schemes and verbiage that Hugh Freeze is most comfortable with. And I think that's probably the most exciting storyline heading into 2024, is we are going to see the Hugh Freeze offense in 2024. You look back to 2023, and it definitely wasn't the full extent of this Hugh Freeze offense. And why did Auburn go out and get Hugh Freeze? One, talent acquisition. He certainly has gotten that going at Auburn. But more importantly, Hugh Freeze is one of the brightest minds in terms of developing quarterbacks and developing an offense. And for Hugh Freeze to come out and say, yeah, we're running this offense the way I want to run it in 2024 is absolutely massive. Now, getting into the quarterback room, not many surprises early on in spring practice, right? Hugh Freeze comes out and says Peyton Thorne showing a lot of leadership. He's the guy that it's his job to lose heading into the 2024 season. I think all things that Auburn fans expected this quarterback battle to look like. But at the same time, he emphasized we got 4 quarterbacks that have the potential to start for this Auburn offense. We're going to get them all reps, and it is going to be an open competition. He mentioned Hank Brown, showed a lot of arm strength through the wind on the first day. I think this quarterback conversation is going to heat up. And right, you can win some games with Peyton Thorne. I think that he's probably going to take a step heading into 2024. I think Peyton Thorne, in the traits that he has, can run this Hugh Freeze offense really effectively. But then you have guys like Hank Brown. I'd throw in Walker White that probably give this offense a little bit more upside in terms of what they can do pushing the ball down the field. And I think one of the storylines is, if this wide receiver room pans out to be as good as I maybe think it can be in 2024, you might see Hugh Freeze go to a quarterback that can push the ball down the field a little bit more effectively. I think that conversation in terms of the wide receiver room and what it looks like probably plays a role in terms of what quarterback wins this battle heading into 2024. Now, we're going to continue to talk about that storyline. It is the biggest storyline that you have for Auburn. The next position group that I'm really kind of going to be locked in for Auburn, and probably the position that I have the most question marks about, is that interior defensive line, right? You look at the defensive end, the jack spot. I really like the edge rushers, right? Jalen McLeod was freaky as an edge rusher for 2023. I thought he was phenomenal. If you see another step, you're looking at a tremendous pass rusher. Keldrick Falk looked phenomenal as a true freshman. And then you sprinkle in some really exciting freshmen in Jamonta Waller, Amaris Williams, TJ Lindsey. I feel pretty good about the edge position for this Auburn program. The question I have is on that inside. And the two guys that I'm kind of keyed in on, that's probably a position that you might see Auburn continue to try to address in the transfer portal after spring practice. And I think it largely relies on two players. One, Trill Carter. Can Trill Carter get back to the form that he had in 2022 at Minnesota? As a Big Ten fan, as a Michigan guy, I watched Trill Carter play some really good football at Minnesota in 2022. He goes to Texas and really just didn't get that much opportunity. And that was more of a result of how loaded Texas was on the inside, sending 3 guys to the NFL draft. If Trill Carter can come in and be that reliable, he's probably going to play nose. I think that you're probably looking at Auburn feeling a little bit more comfortable. And then the other guy I want to talk about is Malik Blockton, who early reports is this is a guy that is putting a lot of weight on, playing not like a true freshman along the line of scrimmage. If he's another guy that can emerge as a true freshman, that's a reliable guy on the inside for that Auburn defense, you probably feel a little bit better about this Auburn inside of the defensive line. Now, if Trill Carter or Malik Blockton maybe don't take those steps that we expect, that's probably a position that Auburn might address in the transfer portal. Now, the next position group that I think this is a really exciting position group to talk about, and that is that secondary room where you have Charles Kelly coming in. He's going to have his hands all over what this defensive back room looks like. Now, I think of it less as a problem and probably more of a puzzle where you got a lot of pieces. And now where are these pieces going to be slotted in? You look at the boundary cornerback spot, Keontae Scott making the move out to boundary. I don't have that many questions. I think he can be really good in that position as well. And then on the other side, Kayin Lee was phenomenal as a true freshman. You bring in Antonio Kite. Those 3 cornerbacks you feel pretty good about in terms of heading into 2024. I think the real conversation is how do we shake out this nickel and safety role where you bring in a guy like Jaron Thompson who could play that free safety role, could play that nickel role. You bring in a guy like Laquan Robinson, who also I think has a lot of versatility in terms of what he can do in the back end. You mentioned guys like Champ Anthony, like Terrence Love, who is young, he's big, but he's a phenomenal athlete coming out of high school. Another guy that probably gives you a little big body if you want to play him as a big nickel, but a guy that has a lot of range as a safety in the back end, Caleb Wooden as well. A lot of different pieces, but I think the biggest conversation here is it's a lot of versatile pieces. It's a lot of guys that can do a lot of different things. They're not pigeonholed into one position. And that's massive in terms of getting my 5 best defensive backs on the field for this Auburn program. When you have all that versatility, it's really going to help get your 5 best guys on the field. Now, the question is, who are the 5 best guys going to be emerging for that Auburn defense? That's another position group that I think is really exciting. Now, I think probably the most exciting position group that we're going to talk about, and I think a lot of Auburn fans are like most excited about, is that wide receiver room where it's a lot of upside. And I think that's where you start. Obviously, you bring Cam Coleman, who, if y'all watch the spring practice clips, Cam Coleman he looks anything but a freshman. He looks like a guy that could step on an NFL field, not look out of place, just from a physical standpoint. And that's normally the first thing you're looking for freshmen playing at the SEC level. Cam Coleman looks like an SEC wide receiver. Quite frankly, looks like an NFL wide receiver. He's towering over all the other wide receivers in that room. Cam Coleman looks to be a guy that is going to play early, going to play often, and I'm starting to buy more into. You guys know I'm cautiously optimistic about true freshmen playing early, especially in the SEC. Cam Coleman's a little bit different, right? They don't make many Cam Colemans. I think he's going to be a guy that it's hard to see not playing a massive role in this Auburn offense. Now, I think what excites you the most is you saw Jay Fair get some really good reps. I thought you saw Caleb Burton play really good down the stretch for Auburn. You kind of have a good sense of what this wide receiver room is going to look like, where you backtrack to 2023. You just had a ton of transfers coming in, a ton of young guys. You didn't really know. And I think one of the big flaws, or I think why Auburn struggled so much in the passing attack, was one, Peyton Thorne wasn't in for spring practice. And so now he's your starting quarterback with not much chemistry with the wide receivers. But more importantly, a lot of those wide receivers, they had 8, 9 wide receivers that were kind of competing to start in that Auburn offense last year. There wasn't a lot of reps to be had with those wide receivers. They were splitting them a lot. I think having a better feel for what wide receivers are going to play is going to be massive in terms of developing that chemistry and comfortability with the quarterback and the wide receivers. I'd mention a guy like Robert Lewis, who, again, I don't even know if he'll start, but you talk about Robert Lewis being a reserve wide receiver for Auburn. This was a guy that was phenomenal at Georgia State in 2023. That just kind of tells you the depth and the talent that Auburn has in that wide receiver room that you just didn't have last year. And so you have Jay Fair, Caleb Burton, both going into year 3 as college football players. You inject a guy like Cam Coleman. You have Bryce Kane, who's one of the fastest players on the field. Perry Thompson getting here in the summer. This is an Auburn wide receiver room that we talk about the quarterbacks needing to take steps. We knew the wide receivers needed to take steps as well. And it certainly looks like they are going to take those steps. And I think the last question is, where are the portal additions going to be after spring practice? And I think this is probably the healthiest you've seen this Auburn roster and depth chart in a really long time. Certainly the healthiest and most talented since Gus Malzahn, right? Brian Harsin did not have this roster in a very good place. The positions that I'm looking at in terms of where Auburn might add, I love the offensive line, right? I think this offensive line is deep. I think there's 8, 9 guys that you feel comfortable about starting, but you have a pretty good sense of who the starting 5 are going to be. I like the wide receivers. I don't really see on this Auburn offense many areas where they need to add. That only spot that I'm looking at is probably on the defensive line, twofolds. One, are Amaris Williams, Jamonte Waller, TJ Lindsey, are they ready to play a lot as freshmen? If some of them are, you probably feel good about the edge spots for this Auburn defense. And then on the inside, right, Trill and a guy like Malik Blockton, are those guys ready? And if they aren't ready, or maybe you feel like, hey, we might need to just add a little bit more veteran talent in terms of just raising this floor. Maybe it takes Amaris Williams 6 weeks to really get his feet under him through that 2024 season. You might add a few guys on that defensive line, but outside of that, I think this is a really healthy roster. I think it's combined with a lot of veteran talent, but a lot of young talent as well that's kind of nipping at the heels. Really excited to see how these position battles break out. A team that we're going to be talking a lot about as spring practice rolls out. Obviously, we're going to preview the spring game, post-game the spring game. Really excited to get into that. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Y'all know I love talking this program. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.